Chapter 17, Saying Goodbye. We continued hiking on trail that wound mostly downhill. The loose gravelly rock made walking difficult and I had to be extremely careful not to slide. More than once I lost my footing on shale that turned into a small landslide, and I landed on my rear end. Instead of helping me up, Nelita scolded me for being clumsy. We came to a hut hidden in the underbrush. I expressed bewilderment that anyone would live in the desert so far from the nearest town. By now you ought to know that sorcerers' houses are found where one least expected them, she said. You mean sorcerers live here? I said, stopping in my tracks. They do. We'll spend the night here and hike back early the next morning. Tomorrow our 3-day interlude will be over. I began rubbing my eyes and I told her that I cherished my time with her and did not want it to come to an end. Don't indulge in sentimentality. You know that it's in the nature of things to come to an end. Fortunately, we already said goodbye. I assured her that I never said any such thing. To cling is indulging, she said firmly and walked to the door of the hut. You're riding on the sorcerer's power now, but when you return to Los Angeles, you'll have to rely on your own power. Therefore, you must behave impeccably or else the bird of freedom will fly away and you will be left feeling sorry for yourself under the tree. Nelita's words gave me a sobering jolt. The thought that the spirit would fly away and I would never see her again was more frightening than anything I could imagine. We entered the adobe hut. It was cool inside. The single room was sparsely furnished. Only a mattress with a folded blanket and a carved wooden trunk lined the walls. A table and 2 orange crates set on their sides were in the center of the room. Nelita sat on the mattress and brought her knees to her chest and folded her arms around them, a position she had taught me to assume whenever I wanted to relax. The bent legs covered the energy centers along the front of the body and prevented energy from dissipating through agitation. We are in the hands of power and we must humbly accept what it offers us, she continued in a gentler tone. We control nothing and must not cling, for in the circular course of things, the end is always one with the beginning. But how do we know when the end will come, or if there will be another beginning? I asked. Nelita straightened her long legs and looked at me squarely. You prepare for the end by always saying goodbye at the beginning. You do this naturally, with as much flair and affection as if you were say hello. Something was forming in my thoughts. I saw what was coming, yet there was no power on earth to avert it. If I kept talking, perhaps there was something I could hold on to after she was gone, if only her words. I told her that I didn't understand how one could always be saying goodbye, when one didn't know when one was leaving. But don't you see, Taisha? You are leaving all the time. Every moment you are leaving one thing to embrace something else. The very act of going to something new means that you are saying farewell to that which you have left behind. If you never say your piece and voice your thanks, if you continually cling to what has passed, how can you ever have the energy to accept the marvelous present? What exactly do you mean by clinging? I asked doggedly, following her to the table. Nelita explained that clinging was both a mental attitude and a physical sensation. Mentally, one is drawn back, again and again, to something that is no longer in one's immediate surroundings. Physically, one becomes constricted, as one holds on to ideas or memories that are illusory. Both mental and physical constrictions reinforce each other, so that one is unable to open willingly and accept fully the new challenges that continually present themselves. If you cling, you are plagued with a sense of loss and longing, Nelita remarked, sitting down on one of the orange crates. So you always feel unfulfilled. It would be much wiser not to cling, but to simply let go. Then you won't feel that you have lost anything, for you have already made full use of whatever it was that left. My advice is to never hold on to anything beyond its time or your time. Nelita explained that saying goodbye at the same time as saying hello is the stalker's art of recognizing and accepting life's impermanence. Nothing ever remains the same, but constant change should not affect a seasoned stalker, for when change comes he or she is ready. How can we be ready for change when we don't know what will happen next or where it will happen? Nelita grabbed my hand that was rubbing my eyes. Slapping it as one would slap a child, she said I must not rub in my agitation but allow the energy in my eyes to flow out freely. As stalkers, we are ready for change, Nelita continued in an even tone, because we accept our fate, which is to evolve. We are able to shift our awareness easily and smoothly to match the events that are shifting around us. By being one with the moment, a stalker does not notice the change and never feels a loss. Thus, our lives are always full and yet remain forever an open-ended question mark. I would feel more secure if our lives were contained in closed brackets, I mumbled. That is because you have grown accustomed to your prison bars. But when your life is a constant question mark, there is no telling what you are capable of doing. Perhaps even escaping the ultimate exclamation point, our death. What if you love someone or want something you can't have? I argued. Then you are bound to feel disappointed or cheated. Nelita shook her head. You never want anything you can't have, she replied. Just as you never want anything you can have. By recapitulating your life and practicing not doing, you change your attitude, and by that I mean, your mind becomes fluid so you cling to nothing. Then whatever comes your way is more than enough. Nor do you expect anything to last. Then, whatever withdraws from you, has stayed longer than its time, but your intrinsic energy never stays or leaves. But you said we will have to leave tomorrow, I protested. I might never see you again. Nelita stood up and paused at the small window cut into the adobe. Perhaps you will be gone, but I will never have to leave this desert. How can that be? Simply because I was never here. I shivered. Nelita said this with such certainty that even if I wanted to doubt her, I couldn't. Impulsively I embraced her. She was solid and yet indescribably empty to the touch. When I closed my eyes, I could no longer feel her. I realized then that her presence in the room depended on visual and auditory clues that were, to a large extent, based on my memory of her, rather than on her actual existence. That thought gave me a jolt of genuine fright. Instinctively, I moved backwards a few steps. To be here and not here at the same time is what sorcerers mean by stalking with the double, Nelita said. It means that being is no more real than not being. There you go again, talking in riddles again, I said, afraid she would vanish at any moment. She looked at me as if impatient with my inability to understand. It means, she continued when she saw in my face genuine confusion, that not being here is as real as being here. The fact that this desert or this hut is something that surrounds me, something that I love profoundly, cannot be denied, but if another scene surrounds me, I will love it as deeply, for the feeling of affection is inside me, and only in the scene for as long as I choose to place it here. She looked at me solemnly. It's true, I take my awareness and energy with me wherever I go, she said. I leave nothing behind. You, on the other hand, leave everything behind like a comet. Anyone can follow your trail. I call that lousy stalking. How can you not be and yet still feel affection? I asked. That is the riddle of the heart that takes stalkers a lifetime to unravel, she said. Someday you will understand it. She took 2 china cups from a shelf and set them on the table along with a teapot. I was surprised to see that they were made of exquisitely fine porcelain, so out of place in an adobe shack. Their unexpected presence gave me a true jolt, and I imagined for a moment that Nelita had plucked them out of the air, for I had not noticed them on the shelf, upon entering the room. On a portable kerosene stove she set water to boil. As she prepared tea, I lifted up one of the cups to examine it. The blue and white porcelain was delicately shaped with a willow pattern design. I wondered if the tea set was an antique from the Ming Dynasty, in which case it was priceless. So much for sorcerers not being interested in personal possessions, I thought. Nelita answered my unvoiced question, saying she had acquired the tea set during her travels in the Orient. She added that it really didn't matter how valuable it was or how old it was because for her it was always here and always now. Nelita filled my cup with tea with aromatic blossoms in it. This cup that was empty moments before is now filled with tea, she said as she put down the pot, or you can fill it with whatever substance you chose, but the cup is the same no matter what it contains, don't you agree? I nodded and waited for her to clarify her point. Nelita explained that once a person has recapitulated and has acquired detachment, their energy body no longer shivers every time the world moves around them. Because they are empty and allow intent to move them, they have a center that is constant and seemingly does not move at all. Didn't anyone teach you about maintaining the center? She asked, surprised. I told her that Clara and Emilito had taught me many things, including how to maintain one's equilibrium while climbing trees in order not to get dizzy or nauseous when hanging upside down. By focusing the gaze on a specific point, it appears as if the world is moving while the body remains stationary. Nelita nodded when I had finished describing to her some of Emilito's tree climbing precepts. She picked up her cup and took a sip. Because the cup has no cracks, it can hold anything at all. You can empty it, or fill it and it is still the same cup. But if it had a crack in it, then you would have noticed the tea dripping out little by little until it was gone. Then, the cup, if it could feel, would sense that it had lost something. I agreed that if it were in the nature of a cup to feel, that because of the crack and the tea tricking out, the cup would experience a sense of loss and might even feel unhappy, unfulfilled, or nostalgic about the past. That is because the cup is cracked, she said, peering at me, but if you seal the crack, then when the cup is filled and emptied, it would not sense a loss because it is the nature of a cup to be empty or full. While it is not in the nature of a functional cup to be cracked or broken. A cup that has a hole or no bottom can no longer function for what it was intended, that is, to be a container. I still don't understand what that has to do with anything. Nelita explained that if the energy body has holes in it or is injured, the person feels the drainage of the life force and tries to hold back the inevitable loss by hoarding and clinging. What a person doesn't realize is that it is not the fear of losing that makes him cling, but the weakness of his energetic being that is the cause of his turmoil. Nelita explained that all of us were like cups, some with cracks, others with no bottoms, while still others were strong and intact. The strong ones never cling or feel a loss when things leave them, Nelita said, because regardless of whether they are empty or full, their essential nature remains intact. Such people can come and go without the burdensome attitudes of the weak, who cling to every crumb that comes their way, always fearing that someone might take it away. They are like beggars who scramble for crumbs because they feel they will never eat again. What can you do if you are a cup with a crack? I asked. Is there any hope for needy beggars? Recapitulate. Do the sorcery passes. Empty and restore your energy. Forget about the tea and the water, the fruit juice that you can't hold. Don't try to become filled again and again, it will only seep out and exacerbate your sense of loss. Dedicate all your energy to revitalization. Then, when you are strong again, it won't matter whether you are holding grapefruit juice or water. You can be empty or full, but you are never possessive about anything or afraid to let go. Why are you no longer possessive? I asked, feeling intoxicated from the aromatic tea. Because you know that it is not what fills you that is important, but your link with intent. Practice not doing, empty your cup to seal it. Once it is energetically sealed, then you'll know nothing is lacking. Nelita explained that to be needy or greedy really means that one is energetically dependent on others for sustenance. Therefore, one is always at the mercy of someone else or begging for energetic handouts. But if you dip your cup into the vastness, then nothing can disturb or disappoint you. For then you are soaked in the source of all things. Then a person is never afraid of saying goodbye, for he or she knows that ultimately there is nothing to leave and no place to go. What about the saucers? I asked. Nelita laughed heartily as if I had said something hilariously funny. Toss them out, she smiled. We have no use for saucers. It is better to rest upon the vastness itself. Nelita set her cup on the table and explained that to rest on the vastness means to forget oneself so completely that there is no difference between oneself and one's surroundings. Then the world conforms to our intent. When we take no notice of ourselves, then our timing is perfect, then we no longer know whether we are moving or being moved. Then the unfathomable guides and guards our being. But first we must rely on our impeccability, Nelita said. Empty your cup through the recapitulation so you won't have the sensation of draining and losing. Then while you are empty you repair the damages to your energy body through the sorcery passes. Finally, after you are energetically sound, and you are clear and at ease with yourself and others, then you can begin to spread that ease and clarity to all your enterprises and encounters. No matter what arises, a stalker will be able to handle it with the ease and delight that springs from the depth of not being. What if the people I'm with are nervous and unhappy? I asked, carefully setting my cup down on the table. Nelita filled it with more of the delicious tea. Wouldn't I be contaminated by their negative moods? I was thinking of an incident that happened not long ago in the anthropology department. I was riding up the elevator when Tim Howard, a graduate student, corralled me and in an aggressive manner asked, "How come you're always smiling? Did you discover the source of happiness?" I became flustered. Immediately I began explaining that I didn't realize I was always smiling, and demanded to know how feeling happy could be offensive, but by the time we got to the third floor, I was thoroughly depressed and depleted of energy. If you exude ease and delight from the depth of your being, you will contaminate others, Nelita assured me. What if they are so strong that they sway me? I insisted. There is no way anyone can affect a stalker because his warrior's purpose cannot be swayed. Now, if you are cracked, or are on the lookout to be liked or are investing and expecting payoffs, then everything seeps out or in and can affect you. As in the elevator, all your energy moves to the place of the damage to repair it, but to no avail, for you cannot hold or change anything, nor can you seal anything when you are so full of yourself, but a complete nature holds itself within itself. It needs nothing added to it, nor can anything be taken away from it. Not even the feelings of acquiring or losing. Nelita reached across the table to affectionately pat my hand. She assured me that after recapitulating my energy body was fairly strong and that was why she could talk to me. It was wrong for me to persist in feeling weak merely out of habit. A person who is united with intent itself enjoys the company of others but never clings or is needy, simply because her emptiness and fullness prevents her from knowing need or tenacity. Nelita explained that to fortify one's energy body entails changing one's behavior and giving up the feelings of desperation that serve no purpose. Where does one begin? I asked, feeling overwhelmed. Nelita smiled and said that the best way to consolidate one's energy body was through the recapitulation, resulting in a cleansing of the turmoil associated with daily existence. It is the dissolution of conflict and inner turmoil that puts the personal self to rest, Nelita said. It results in merging of one's inner and outer worlds, so that what one thinks and does and says are the same as what happens. It was getting dark. Nelita got up and pointed to the bed. Have a good rest. I am going for a short walk. Adios. You mean hasta luego, don't you? I said. Nelita stood for a moment and smiled. Then stepped out and closed the door behind her. When I awoke the next morning, Don Juan was standing in doorway peering at me. He said to get up for it was time to leave. We climbed down the canyon by a different trail and hiked back to his house. As we walked, I was filled with a vibrant energy. I felt open, porous, and light. I wanted to ask him where Nelita had gone and to tell him all the things she had said and what had happened at the ruins, when he stopped me with a flick of his hand. Suddenly, I couldn't put my recollections into words. I knew some things could never be forced into words and had to remain at the level of silent knowledge. Carlos was waiting when we arrived at Don Juan's house. My heart leapt with relief at seeing him again. It had only been 3 days, but it seemed to have been forever. He did not ask where I had been. It was the riddle of the heart that Nelita had said I would take a lifetime to unravel. Looking into the new Nawal's bright shiny eyes, I knew then it had to do with letting go of the self, and of accepting the gifts the spirit offered without question, without interfering.